Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we dig into those procedural documents that can seem a bit dense, but are actually packed with absolutely essential information.
And today we're really getting into the weeds. We're in the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, Chapter 2500, which is all about maintenance fees.
Right. And specifically, we're zeroing in on one section, MPP Section 2515, which covers the, let's call it the how-to of paying those fees.
Exactly. This is all about the logistics. The mission here is pretty simple, but the consequences of getting it wrong are huge. We're talking about what it takes to keep a granted patent right alive.
And it sounds like this is where things can go sideways, not in a courtroom, but just with a simple administrative slip-up.
That's it precisely. A missed deadline, incorrect information, a miscalculation, any of those can lead to a patent expiring instantly.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the financial side. What kind of money are we talking about to keep a patent in force? And what are those hard deadlines?
Well, the fee structure itself is pretty interesting. The fees get significantly higher as the patent gets older.
The idea being that if the patent is still valuable after a decade, the owner should be willing to pay more to maintain it.
You've got it. It's a self-selecting mechanism. For this discussion, let's focus on the later, more extensive stages, because that's where the financial stakes are highest.
Okay, give us the numbers. Let's make this concrete.
All right. So the first really big one, this is after the patent has been around for a while,
Yeah.
is the fee due at 7 years and 6 months after the grant.
And that cost?
That one is currently $2,480.
Okay, so a significant investment to say, yes, this is still a valuable asset.
Absolutely. And then it jumps again. The final maintenance fee, which is due at 11 years and 6 months after the grant, is $4,110.
Wow. Okay.
And here's a critical detail. The regulations define the actual due date as the very last day you can pay without a surcharge.
Ah, so it's not just the date it's due, it's the last day before you get penalized.
Precisely. That's a really important distinction. The penalty clock starts ticking the very next day.
Okay, so let's unpack that. I missed the due date by 1 day. What happens? Is there a safety net, or is the patent just gone?
There is a safety net, but it's not exactly a comfortable one. The regulations give you a 6-month grace period right after that due date.
6 months? That seems reasonable.
It is, but it comes at a cost. Any
Ah.
payment made during that 6-month grace period absolutely must include a surcharge.
So you can't just send in the original fee.
No. The USPTO is very clear on this. They will only accept the maintenance fee if that required surcharge is included. If it's not, the whole payment is considered incomplete.
And an incomplete payment is basically no payment at all.
In the eyes of the office, yes. It could lead to expiration just the same.
This really drives home the need for, well, precision. Acting on time saves you a hefty penalty. But what if you miss that 6-month window entirely? What then?
Then you are in a much more difficult situation. The patent expires. To get it back, you have to file a formal petition to reinstate it.
And I'm guessing that's not just a simple form?
Not at all. You have to prove that the delay in payment was either, quote, unavoidable or unintentional.
And what's that burden of proof like? Is that a high bar to clear?
It's an incredibly high bar. Unavoidable is nearly impossible to prove. Unintentional is a bit more feasible, but you still have to provide a detailed statement of facts. And these petitions, they're expensive and time-consuming.
So the message is, pay on time. Avoid the grace period if you can, but absolutely do not let it expire.
It makes paying on time look very, very cheap by comparison.
Definitely. Okay, let's get deeper into the administrative weeds. Who can actually make this payment? Is it just the patent owner?
That's a great question because the USPTO is surprisingly flexible on this point. The fee can be paid by the patentee, sure, but it can also be paid by any authorized person or organization.
So a law firm, an accounting department.
Yes. And get this, no formal written authorization is even required for a third party to pay. They can just send the money.
Okay, so that flexibility on who pays must put a huge burden on making sure the payment is identified correctly. How does the USPTO know where to apply the money?
That's the crux of it. The identification has to be perfect. You need the patent number, obviously. But you also need the corresponding application number.
The application number, even after the patent has been granted for years.
Yes, it's a secondary identifier, a crucial backup, really, especially if there's any ambiguity, like with reissue patents.
Okay, so patent number, application number. What else?
You have to specify the fee year. Is this the 3.5, 7.5, or 11.5 year payment? And of course, the exact amount due. Any mistake there can get the payment misapplied or just flat out rejected.
And what about entity status? Small entities and micro entities pay less, right? How does that factor in?
A vital point. Yes, their fees are much lower. When you submit the payment, you have to be very clear if you're claiming or changing an entity status.
And if you get that wrong, say you pay this small entity fee when you've grown and now qualify as a large entity.
That's a classic insufficient payment scenario. It's a major risk. You have to correct that deficiency immediately with the full amount plus any surcharges, or the patent could expire.
So the office is tracking not just the money, but your legal status as well.
Constantly. It's an ongoing obligation.
All right, here's a scenario that must keep patent paralegals awake at night. You're paying for multiple patents at once, in a bundle, but you send in the wrong total amount, not enough to cover everything. What happens?
It's a potential catastrophe. The rule is if you're paying for multiple patents, you have to list them in increasing patent number order.
Okay.
And if the money you send isn't enough for all of them, the USPTO will apply the funds sequentially right down the list until the money runs out.
So the first patent on the list gets paid, the second gets paid, and the last one just expires.
Exactly. The patent at the bottom of the list could be lost, and you might not even realize it right away. The office just did what the rules say to do.
Is there any way to protect against that kind of sequential expiration?
There is. If you use a deposit account with the USPTO and you authorize them to charge it,
Safety net.
a very important one. If your submitted payment is short, the office can then draw the remaining balance from your deposit account. It prevents that whole sequential application disaster from ever happening.
So the deposit account isn't just for convenience. It's a form of insurance against administrative error.
That's the perfect way to think about it.
Let's talk about an even more complex case. Reissue patents. How do they work with maintenance fees?
This is a classic trap. The rule is that a separate maintenance fee payment is required for each reissue patent that comes from a single original patent.
Wait, a separate fee for each one? So if one patent gets reissued into 2 new patents,
You're now paying 3 maintenance fees, one for the original patent if a reissue application is still pending on it, and one for each of the new reissue patents.
that's a staggering amount of administrative tracking.
It is. And crucially, all of those fees are calculated based on the grant date of the original patent, not the newer reissue patents. It's a very easy place to make a mistake.
Okay, let's shift from what to pay to where to send it. What are the channels?
The best way is electronic through the USPTO website. It's fast, you get immediate confirmation, it's just cleaner.
But what if you have to mail it in? Maybe you're using their transmittal form, the PTOSB 45.
If you're using mail, you have to use a very specific address. It's not the general USPTO address.
What's the address?
It has to be addressed to Mail Stop Maintenance Fee, Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, P.O. Box 1450, Alexandria, Virginia, 22313 1450.
Mail stop maintenance fee. Why is that part so important?
That's the administrative secret sauce. That mail stop code routes your payment directly to the correct financial department. Without it, it goes into the general mail queue.
Where it could sit for weeks.
Weeks, even months. And if your payment is near the deadline, that delay could be the difference between on time and expired.
That's a huge takeaway. Use the mail stop. Now, you also mentioned something about a fee address versus a correspondence address. Why would you need 2 addresses?
Right, so the general correspondence address is for all back and forth with the examiner, but the rules let you specify a separate fee address just for maintenance fee matters.
And what's the strategic advantage there?
It's all about making sure the bill goes to the right person. The correspondence address might be for a law firm that's no longer involved. The fee address can be pointed directly to, say, the corporation's accounting department or the current party responsible for payment.
So it prevents critical notices from getting lost when a patent changes hands or representation changes.
Exactly. It's a critical risk management tool.
So if we boil this all down, the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is that keeping a patent alive is really a game of administrative precision. It's not just about having the money.
Not at all. It's about understanding the deadlines, the grace period, the surcharges, and getting all the identification details exactly right every single time.
Especially in those complex cases like reissues or when you're managing payments for a whole portfolio.
Right. The maintenance fee system, it's designed to make sure the patent owner still values the right they hold. But the sheer procedural rigor, it really underscores the ongoing responsibility that comes with that right. It's a right that requires constant, meticulous care to keep it alive.
A truly essential deep dive into the fine print. Thank you for making that so clear.
My pleasure.
We would like to extend a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this entire audio series.
This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.